I've talked about this at length, wrote about it in American Marxism, and on and on. The Islamists, I'm not talking about Muslims per se, I'm talking about Islamists. The Marxists, I'm not talking about liberals per se, have the same goal. It's the destruction of Western civilization. Marx rejected Western civilization. Says first there were the primitives. He says humanity works in stages. The primitives, then feudalism, then capitalism, then socialism, then communism. The Islamists wish to wipe out the West as well, for different reasons. But their objective is the same, so that's why you see them marching. People just don't get it. I say it over and over and over again, but you see them marching, whether it's at Columbia University or elsewhere, this fusion of the Marxists and the Islamists that I keep talking about over and over again. Others are beginning to talk about it. It will eventually penetrate the static out there. And typically the way it works is somebody will say it and say, as I've been saying for years, right, Mr. Producer? But destroying Western civilization is the goal. That's why what AOC and Sanders and their ilk preach is utterly incompatible with our constitutional system, our republic. AOC is getting very angry with me, but she won't mention me. She keeps complaining that somebody on Fox and elsewhere keeps calling her a Marxist and a communist. It's me. Come on in, young lady. Let's have a discussion. But she won't. She refuses. You know, when I wrote American Marxism, and when I went on Fox and these other places, I said, stop calling them socialists. Stop calling them progressives. Call them Marxists. That's what they are. Marxists. We've been beaten into submission because of the Army McCarthy hearings in the 50s and so forth. Oh, look at this. No, they are Marxists by what they state and what they want. American Marxists, not German Marxists, not Marxists who want to round us all up and eliminate us. I'm not talking about that. I wrote the whole book on it. They're American Marxists. So it's not just economic class warfare. It's identity politics. It's class warfare about men and women. It's class warfare among the races. They took the 1960s, the 1970s, and they rolled it into Marxism. That's what's going on. That's why they defend transgenderism, to destroy the nuclear family. That's why they defend school boards that stand between parents and children. What did Marx say in the Communist Manifesto? We must destroy all existing social structures. And he says, you criticize us for wanting to destroy the connection between parents and children? Well, what kind of social structure is that? It's a hierarchical structure. That's what he says. Read it. And so they seek to destroy the nuclear family. They seek to destroy parental rights. They don't believe in separation of powers. That's why their judges are doing what they're doing right now. Hegel didn't believe in it. Marx didn't believe in it. Woodrow Wilson didn't believe in it. Franklin Roosevelt didn't believe in it. And so that's where we are. But this fusion, remember, mark it down, because I say it again and again, this fusion between Marxism and Islamism, it is real. The Marxists like Islamism, not because they agree with the end result, but because they agree that together they can destroy Western civilization, starting not with Israel, but America. These people who say, what does Israel's fight have to do with us? These people say, so what? We can manage Iran with nuclear weapons. They are dragging us into their suicidal mentality. They are insane. They are attacking Judeo-Christian Western Enlightenment principles with their little bumper sticker labels. They may sound smart, but at their core, they're actually quite stupid. I'm blessed to have this microphone. Blessed. So I can explain this to people who care. to people who care. The Marxists and the Islamists, their paramount goal is to destroy Western civilization. They're doing it in Europe. So many parts of Europe are gone. Most of our Ivy League schools are gone. Trump's trying to deal with this. The Democrat Party lawyers, these extremists, the progressives, quote unquote, Schumer said they put them there for a reason to thwart Trump. They're trying to prevent it. And you might say, Mark, well, why do these people want to destroy Western civilization? Why? Because they bought into the ideology. They bought into the ideology. You can't have the 10 Commandments in school. You can't even have silent prayer in school. You see, the difference is this nation was born out of Judeo-Christian beliefs, was born out of the Enlightenment and so forth, Locke and Montesquieu. But there's a difference between politicians and public officials and scholars and statesmen who have faith, who believe in God, and those who say there's one faith, it's the only faith, and we will impose it on everybody else. Those are faiths, in the case of Islam, that have not gone through, in my opinion, the Enlightenment. Now, all faiths don't have to. That one needed to.
Here we are. You know what time it is. We're back here in this revolution, this info revolution here that we're a part of. We're a part of this movement, and people are incensed, and they're sickened, and they're exhausted, and they're just in a state of dis-ease over the amount of deception, the massive, consistent and constant psyop made to layer on lies, a constant membrane of media lies persists to create a state of hysteria and just really malformed information and knowledge among all the people. So that people are not, they're totally deranged, or they're totally disconnected by the barrage of noise that becomes the disinformation mockingbird media compression chamber, right? So we've learned as a people, as a society, and as a modern societal movement to find out what is going on, what people are talking about, what is important, and what the outlying information is that is not being covered, right? And so you can call it the Streisand effect, you can call it whatever you want, but people they're paying attention, and they've been burned so many times that they no longer really believe in what they're being told as a norm, right? They no longer really believe. So we have to recognize that, we're bringing it together here. We're here to surface the emergence of the American Revolution within the people, and everything we're doing here becomes a focal point because we're really getting you to help you pay attention to what's going on. So the more that we can get you to pay attention to what's going on and what's really important, then we can help to educate you and inform you. And that's really the most important thing here, because really what they're going to do here, if we're going to get into info wars, is they're going to move towards a total destruction and a total annihilation of the Jewish race off the face of the earth. Okay, so that wasn't a one-off that the imperial Roman forces of the Caesar, the Emperor of Rome, tried to destroy Israel. It wasn't a one-off that later on that the papal Caesar, right, papacy of Rome, of the religious imperium of Rome that would come later, tried to destroy the Jews off the face of the earth in their inquisitions, right? It wasn't a one-off that ultimately Hitler thought he was going to create a new Holy Roman Imperium or Emperor, a new Holy Roman Emperor. That one, of course, goes to the InfoWars team to pay attention to when Jones was trying to bring about a new European Union Commission, which was later created in reality. Hitler's desire to create a new European Union Commission was a desire to bring back the Holy Roman Empire. And of course, the papists over there who can't hack that, they don't want to give up their Christmas tree, and there's their little stocking by the fireplace. They don't want to give up their little candy cane or put their little star on top of their Christmas tree and their anti-Christianity. They don't want to give up their anti-Christianity. They have to clutch onto it as the most deepest inner part of their inner core, so that everything else has to become a useful part of stitching together the world conspiracy, and of course leaving out Rome, because you can't if you're a Catholic, you can't bring Romanism into the equation. You have to protect it, right? So if Romanism and the Vatican and the power structure there, the white power structure there, the elite, ultimate ruling class of elitists who ultimately would choose and coronate princes and queens of Europe and the kings, right? They would get the coronation and the blessing of Rome. So they were a substrata below the ruling power structure, which is Rome. Understand? So the Roman power structure is really what is at the center core here. And ultimately, the ultimate deflection of the shock troops, which everyone admits, the Jesuit order, their ultimate whipping boy and their ultimate scapegoat has always been the Jewish people, the race of descendants of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel, right? Those descendants were constantly the target of these individuals. And we just got done having the discussion with EJP, right? We talked to EJP. And EJP told us that the blood purity laws of the Jesuit order, and I wanted to get more into it, like what was really going on in the background. Why were there allowed to be Diego Lainez or right? I probably said that wrong, but there were certain individuals who were in the Jesuit order early on who were Jewish, but then later on it just suddenly they turned and changed and they threw all the Jewish people out in the 1500s, you say 1589. So that's pretty early on to decide that you're going to never, ever, ever allow any Jewish blood into your vicinity or in amongst your highly lauded elite dignitaries and princes of the imperium who are there to maintain domination. And it's not a military domination or economic domination or the domination of nobility, but it's all in one. It's a total religio-cultic absolute mastery of society. So it's far beyond brainwashing, right? It's a total civilizational zeitgeist that controls and implements, fosters the superiority of the elite classes, like a caste system. So these are, you're a common man, your name is Jack Blacksmith or whatever, you're just a bastard son of nobody, and you get down on your knees and you kiss the dirt every time the royal King Philip Espinoza Marduk III or whatever, right, comes out. The royal lineage of the 10th generation, right, he comes out, you get down, everyone blows the trumpet, and of course, you get down, you kiss the dirt. And if you don't, you know what happens, right? That's the kind of system that we broke away from, the kind of absolute domination and slavery over the minds and hearts and destinies of man. So this process of coming to the light of the truth has got to break every golden calf, every idol, every like stronghold of the mind that you resist and refuse to give in and refuse to give place to the truth, and it finds it. It's like water within the hull of your boat. When you have a crack in the hull of your boat, the water finds it every time. It's impossible for the truth not to ultimately come to light over time. And so we have to recognize that behind the scenes here, there is a world conspiracy to ultimately destroy the Jewish race. And so that's what that's what you see here, that is exposed in this process of discussing this anti-Jewish fury, this anti-Jewish bias and hatred that is being fomented everywhere. And even in the process of, and admittedly, the people of Israel are under a horrible sentence of death and extermination, and it's going to lead to Armageddon. It's going to lead to the intervention of Jesus Christ in person. And people, they don't believe it. Of course, it's the scriptures. It's what's ultimately going to happen here. And, this man, Jesus Christ, said, I'm going to come at a time when you least expect it. And that's what we're facing here. We're facing a time where individuals like me are going to die out, and the persecution comes, and people who had faith no longer dare speak the word of it, and go into their grueling serfdom of slavery, into the new dark ages, the neo-serfdom that is about to hit the earth, the great tribulation. That's what's coming. That's what's about to happen. And we're here to just discuss it, and we can expose it all we want, but it's going to happen. It is certainly going to be something that the future generations are going to have to witness and experience in person. And we have to cry and weep and roll around at night bitterly losing sleep over the fate that awaits our children in the future and their children because of the horror of what is promised to come. And we hope for the strength of our children to be able to not partake in this system that could potentially destroy their souls. That's what we're talking about. And so it's a system of technocracy, a system of slavery and absolute imperial tyranny brought to the height, the zenith of technotronic horror. Right, that's what's about to come with the arrival and the invention of the tyranny of the Antichrist that's kind of unfold on the earth. And of course, everyone is looking for a different person. We were just discussing, Eric John Phelps is sure that the false prophet who will accompany the Antichrist will be a Jew, right? So that there's reasons for people believing that, and there's reasons for people believing the various aspects of this thesis, right? And it's a mystery. That's why it's not completely clear what will happen until it actually unfolds. You had the Millerites in the 1800s who were sure that Jesus was going to arrive, and they prepared for it, right? And you always have some group out there who thinks that they can, prognosticate and the tea leaves, right, and figure out what will happen next. And it's clear that more and more information is applied, that the illumination regarding the prophecies and the Word of God becomes more and more clear, right? So with the approach of the event, the accuracy and the precision of the data becomes like more and more terrifyingly clear. And so we approach it, more and more things are happening. We're getting into this global system. We're getting into this place where we're going to have 10 world leaders, like a system of 10 kings, a system of 10 powers, right? 10 world powers are going to ultimately be inframed and kind of crystallized into place into a new world order. And that's what's really arriving. That's what's predicted since, really, if you go back to Daniel, you're going back into the time of, you're going back 500 years before the time of Christ. You can see that this movement and this rise of this Antichrist power was always really in the works. And so in order for this to happen, and in order for these kind of this persecution to really arise, we're going to have to see this point of total international onslaught and widespread attacks and murders against Jewish people. So you're going to see this whole Palestinian thing, and these people are willing to, the psyop is conditioning their brains so intensely, they're willing to throw away their futures and their lives, and just in order to try to lash out in the worship of this media stardom, right? It's just kind of like this celebrity of I'll kill a Jew in order to fight for Palestine because I live in Boston, yeah, right? And then so there's all these weak, vassal, pathetic degenerates out there who are going to kind of partake in this, just like how people will go to a world wrestling event when WWF and go watch Hulk Hogan tear his shirt off, right? That's the same kind of level of intellectual elasticity that we really have here working in individuals who are going to just kind of step into this arena, and you can see that just the idea that these high level kind of ex-bureaucrats or whatever, ex-deep state agents like James Comey are going to try to put out hit orders, right? And just kind of lends to the general trend. It feeds in to the energy and the negative field of energy and animosity, and gives credence and power to the lunatics out there who might try to take a shot at Trump, or who might try to enact some kind of horrible plan in their madness to try to just really kill anyone, right? Kill any Jewish couple, right? Who really stepped in there and shot Biden, right? Like no one was willing to suffer life and limb on any kind of grand cause for the sake of the American people in that regard. But and when it comes to stoking madness and mental illness and kind of cognitive disease among the riffraff in the world, you can really stir them up. Like you can give justification through these channels and these buzzwords to the fanatics, and that's really what they're trying to do. They really need a lot of their funding mechanisms, and the USAID money is that you would go to fund Antifa or whatever, fund the radicals and fund the accelerationists, radical groups, right? Is no longer really there. So they're supposed to be anti-capitalist, but they don't have capital. I guess they just don't show up for work it's just like any other corporation. So but they're going to find other ways to fund it. They stole all that money. They stole the $93 billion in the last 76 days of the Biden presidency. They stole billions and billions and billions and hundreds of billions. And so all that money will still get funneled through, and they'll still get to have their summer of revolutionary violence. So everyone has to prepare for that and get ready.
Mr. Secretary, I want to go back to some of your earlier testimony, be sure I heard it correctly. The 76-day period you're talking about, that's the period between the time that President Trump was elected and President Biden left office. Is that right?
That is correct.
And during that short period of time, 76 days, How much taxpayer money went out the door of the Department of Energy?
From the Loan Program Office in loans and commitments, $93 billion. Well over twice as much as in the previous 15 years. So,
how do you vet and do due diligence on a loan in 76 days? One loan, much less $93 billion. How do you do it?
I think it's probably pretty clear it wasn't done in many cases. As I mentioned, I'm told I'm holding back clearly in place stuff. There is lots of funds that have gone out the door and commitments that were made from businesses that provided no business plan, no numbers about their own financial solvency or how this project
So
can
you're
actually
telling
work.
me that the Department of Energy, in the 76-day period before their boss was going to leave office, gave or loaned money to entities that had no business plan?
Correct.
No financials?
Correct. A number of those were were before the 76-day period as well. I've come in with great concern about how this institution, this great American institution, has been run and how American taxpayer money has been handled. I'm sorry everyone's upset that we're taking some time to do it, but what we've seen,
I'm not
what the
upset.
record shows,
I'm
is
not
just
upset. Could it be
irresponsible.
that a lot of people say you haven't returned your calls? Could it be that you and your colleagues have returned the calls, but the people calling just didn't like the answer? Could that be a possibility?
I'm not aware of that. You know, I give my cell phone number to any senator that
I know
wants
you
it,
do.
and I return my calls.
I mean, has your department gone dark? Somebody said your department's gone dark. Is it dark over there?
It doesn't look dark behind me.
I don't see any of you sitting on your hands. Somebody made that charge. I see everybody's hands. Let me ask you something else, Mr. Secretary. Does anybody ever come to the Department of Energy to get some of this free money and lie to you?
I have not experienced that, but I think it's a reasonable assumption that has happened.
Does anybody ever come to you? Or is it conceivable that some of these folks that heard about this free money came to you with a half-baked idea?
I think it's very conceivable. In fact, I've seen such plans that were
You've seen
half-baked would be
plans
charitable.
that didn't have a business plan, right?
Correct. A promise to develop one, to find a location.
Just give me the money and I'll develop the plan later.
Correct.
And now you're going back through, not money that's already been contracted, but you're going back through and checking each one of these loans and these grants to make sure there was no stealing, aren't you?
We are.
And you make sure there was no incompetence, aren't you? Is that correct?
We're looking at that, and yeah, my blood pressure is rising right now just thinking about what we have seen and what did happen at the department.
And you're going to tell some of these boondoggles no, aren't you?
That's correct.
And they're going to be upset, aren't they?
That's correct.
And they ought to be upset, shouldn't they?
I don't think they should be upset. I think they should be ashamed.
It's rare that I'm speechless. But I want to be sure I understood. The people running the Department of Energy for President Biden's administration shoveled $93 billion, not million, $93 billion out the door in 76 days, and it just happened to be the time between when President Trump was elected and President Biden, their boss, was leaving. Is that right?
It is correct and distasteful. Confidence undermining.
My God. Look, I hope you take whatever time you need to go through all of these projects penny by penny. I mean, I've heard this testimony today. Well, it'll cost jobs in my state. If somebody steals $50 million and goes and spends the money in their state, that's going to stimulate the economy, isn't it?
Yes, it will.
But that's still stealing, isn't it? And it's still illegal, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, they were spending money at the Department of Energy like it was ditch water. Their budget went from $60 billion to $160 billion since fiscal year 2021. It just seems to me like snout in the trough since fiscal year 2021. It just sounds to me like there were a lot of people coming to the Department of Energy who had all 4 feet and their snout in the trough. And I hope you'll turn down the boondoggles and refer the thieves to the Department of Justice.
We will indeed. Senator, the one complication in there, too, is mixed in there are good companies doing good things honestly with credible plans.
And you're trying to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Yes, that's what we're trying to do. That's our job. And we're doing it. But there's a lot of chaff.
Let me ask you one final question. Let me go back to how many employees you have. Now, there have been some allegations today that you've cut tens of thousands of employees. Is that accurate?
Well, I think the allegations were thousands, and our head count will ultimately be reduced by thousands, but we are doing it slowly.
You've got 16,000 now?
Yes.
And you think you can do it with fewer than 16,000?
Correct.
What's wrong with that?
I think it's just common sense business.
Yeah. Businesses do it every day in the real world.
American taxpayers deserve it.
That's never happened in the federal government. I mean, it's easier to divorce your spouse than to get rid of a federal employee up here. That's not the way the world works, is it, Mr. Secretary?
It's not the way the world should work, and I give enormous credit to President Trump, who had the boldness to say, if there's a right thing that needs to be done and it's difficult, please do it. And so, yes, this is new territory. This is not what happens normally in the federal government, but it is what needs to happen periodically in the federal government. And I give the credit to President Trump, who's willing to take the heat and has set the departments free. Make the changes you need to make to better serve American taxpayers and American consumers.
Du hast mich. Du hast mich. Du hast mich. Du hast.
I think it's incumbent upon us to recognize that this fight for your life and the right for you to defend your life is constitutional. This is all constitutional. This whole thing is a test of the Constitution, and you are the Constitution. The Constitution is a paper, and you are the protectee. You're the individual who is standing up for the rights that are declared there, and the Declaration of Independence, and that independence, in fact, that you have to be independent, to protect your rights, and to have your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, your religion, and you know what I mean, have your reasonable access to the market and to commerce so that you can live and the relative necessities of your welfare, of your life, right? And so no matter what happens, you have to stand your ground. You can't just be folded under with these people, right? When they come to, like, what are they going to do? Trample the highways and stop cars and try to take people out of their cars for Palestine, right? Or they're going to go in their library, these LARPers, these weak and pathetic and limp-wristed, sad folks, right? These pathetic queers are going to go and, like, we're going to storm our own library in our campus. Like, I think people pay good money to go to the campus and learn, and they're all going into debt, like college debt that they believed Biden was going to pay off for them because they're fucking worms, right? And they're willing to just blow that time and just, like, take it over for the revolution, man, right? It's a sad state of affairs. They're sad. It shows how weak, how empty they are, how they're just blank vessels ready to be imprinted on with any kind of, like, radical insanity that CNN or James Comey or whatever, right? Their acolytes and their peer culture tell them is cool. So that's what they've endeavored to exercise in their life, right? And so that the consequences are there. Their ultimate goal is to interrupt their nation. Like, this is their country. They have a social security number. They have an American ID card, right? They're American patriots like us, and they're the ultimate betrayers and the ultimate fifth column of treasonists and traitors, because they have the power here, not as invaders from abroad, they were being sent home, but they have the power here as Americans to defend America or to burn a hole in it, to try to destroy it and try to pass around toxic and poisonous idea viruses that just poison the other weak, easily influenced individuals around them and trigger them into violent acts, right? It's completely empty vanity, and it's totally gripping insanity, and so that's how they will mark their careers as people, as individuals, just like Hillary Clinton did and Bill Clinton when they were in college, right? Supporting Chairman Mao and his great work, right? And so that's what they would get if they could achieve their greatest ambition. They would do the same thing, and they would have us all murdered and dropped into a mass grave, right? And so what are we doing? Like, are we mass murdering them, or are we committing ourselves to a communist conspiracy to destroy Democrats and leftists in this country? No, we are committed to just be left alone, to have the right to have the arms for our protection and for hunting, which is a major deal, but mainly for protecting ourselves against the overreach of a tyrannical state, and to be able to have families and to be able to, carry on our religious traditions, not be persecuted for the convictions of our conscience and the liberty that we take when we practice our faith. We are here to die on that hill. And other people can spend their time conspiring to destroy America if they want, and you don't see us over there interrupting them or conspiring against their rights. But all the while, they use their rights to conspire against and destroy this very nation, this very Constitution by which gives them their livelihood and their dignity and their wealth and riches. So how horrible and how vile and disfigured and monstrous are these people? How useful are they to our enemies, right? Our enemies look over and see these deformed little trolls who are willing to sell out their own state, and they just give them money and give them access and suck them in, right? What kind of weapon systems, what kind of blueprints, what kind of state secrets were sold by the Clintons selling out their own nation? These are individuals, in my opinion, from where I'm from, who were these things borne out to be true in a trial. They'd certainly be hung by the neck until they were deceased, right? That's my view of it. That's the American view of it. It's always been the real American view. So as we go forward here, guys, we're going to work hard to bring you as much interesting and just really hard-hitting. So, yeah, ultimately, we just want to give you everything that we have, the inside scoop. We're not here to steer you in any particular direction. Ultimately, Protestantism is denominationalism, which is good. Everyone who's trying to always universalize everything and bring everything into one super universal, ultimate, corporate body, right? That's what the ultimate imperial Roman Church wanted to do. It just had to found a way to get to its ecumenical, universalist, imperial ambitions. It needed religion, right? Politics wasn't good enough. Conquering nations with your legions and creating everyone into slaves wasn't good enough. But religious faith that could sweep worldwide. That's why it's so egregious and blasphemous and vile that the Roman Church tried to attach itself to this spiritual movement and the the revolution of the Son of God, of Jesus Christ, and his mission to ultimately his people first and ultimately to the world through his disciples, right? Jesus was called to his people first, the Jewish people, and he is very focused even now, in my view, on making sure that they're saved and brought into a place where they're restored in their relationship to their God, right? And so that if people who are Christians, out the Romanists or out there, they don't understand that they're not the focal point of God's work here, right? That's the papacy and the Vatican, the cardinals, and all their fakery and their churchianity and their religious effect, their religiosity and the religious affectation of all the incense and choir boys singing, right, and trying to create like an air of heavenliness, right? That luminescence of religiosity is not enough. It's not enough, guys. It's not enough to bring in the people to a relationship with God. It gives you an experience like in a cult or something, right? Like they used to go and participate in the mysteries of Eleusis, right? The Eleusinian mysteries, and they would go up and they'd go through all the rituals and the seven initiation rites, and they would drink it was probably like LSD, like mold, you know, that goes on wheat, and they would take the drug, man. They would trip out, and they would have the great experience, and they'd have the illumination, and they would go through the initiation rite of the mysteries of Eleusis. So it's just like these kind of like these kind of passages and these ritual kind of Masonic secret society initiation enactments of magical rituals are age old, coming from time immemorial, and they're passed on from generation to generation. The people that are practicing now, they don't even know where they came from. And they'll pass them on to other people, and they'll get old, and they pass on in time, and those individuals in the future, they will know are those expressions and those multiplying agents and the esoteric essence of the multiplying agency within it, right? These individuals are just going to just carry on practicing the craft just as their forefathers and the Druids before them did. And that's what happened with Romanism and Islam. I'm saying people just do what they are brainwashed to do, and they're too afraid, they don't have the internal courage to question it. And that's what Protestantism ultimately does. Is Protestantism is in a constant state of questioning. That's what we do here. We challenge every single thing. We take every single golden calf, we put it up on the stand, and we shoot a hole in it. And we just see. If we question this, will Allah come and strike us dead? Or Zeus, or anyone, right? And we expect that ultimately we could get deep sixth, we could get 86th, right? We could get Seth riched off the face of the earth. But at least we're going to go to the Lord, guys, with all the faith and the works of what we did. Like, hey, we challenged it. We asked these tough questions. We brought this information that was supposed to be suppressed. We brought it forth, and we put it in front of people. So yeah, we want to be the inner core right here of what this focal point is all about. We want to bring clarity and make sure that the message is on point. We're not going to get off track here. And of course, there's a lot of people out there. Of course, Netanyahu is a World Economic Forum globalist insider elite. Of course.
Netanyahu declared biblical Old Testament genocide. It means wipe them all out. It's right there in the Old Testament. And so, Netanyahu gets mad when you say, hey, you're doing a genocide. I mean, you called it that. It's right there in the Old Testament. Hey, they're sacrificing kids to Moloch, kill them all, and kill their farm animals. So, they worship Moloch, kill them. Well, these Palestinians aren't worshiping Moloch. And Netanyahu knows when they mow down children and shoot pregnant women on TV on purpose, that what's that going to do? It's going to piss the world off against Israel. And it is going to enrage the world, and then Jews are going to get persecuted around the planet, and then they're going to support hardline war, they're going to support a greater Israel, and they're going to move to Israel. And then in the West, the Israel lobby will push for anti-free speech laws, the ADL and others. That's the formula. And I don't hate the average Jew. And I know Israel's got a lot of diverse politics, and Netanyahu's like an 18% approval rating. And most Israelis don't want an Iran strike. So I don't look at this monolithically, just like I look at the Muslims monolithically. But Netanyahu is a bad guy. And working with the neocons and George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, their fingerprints were all over 9/11, all over the hijackers, all over the preparation, all over the moving vehicles, urban moving systems, all over the dancing Israelis, all over Larry Silverstein in Building 7. I'm going to do a special live stream today at about 3 o'clock on that. You'll find it at Exit Alex Jones. But the point is that it's the same neocon globalist alliance. And the neocon still control with the Democrats of the Republicans, supposedly, the foreign policy. But then a whole another wing of the Democrats is absolutely anti-Israel and pro-Palestine. And again, but they're all pro-Ukraine war. I mean, so it's psychotic. And if you study these pro-Palestine groups, it's all they care about. It's all they talk about in the whole world. They don't care about the 30 million dead from the COVID shots. They don't care about 1 million plus dead in the war in Ukraine. All they care about, period, ever, is Palestine. And it's because that's what's hyped and that's what's pushed. And they're communist and they're socialist and they're Antifa and they are just run from bad to worse. And you got evil ones that know what they're doing, and you got the I'm a loving person. You can look at his eyes. This is Elias Rodriguez. Oh, I have to protect the children. I've got to strike back for them. What Israel's doing is wrong. So I'll just go randomly kill some Jews. But he didn't just randomly kill some. Very suspicious. So very targeted, it appears. Maybe he was just, in his view, lucky. We'll hopefully find out more. But you couldn't hand a better gift to the Likudniks and the neocons at Benjamin Netanyahu than this. And as I predicted this, it's not hard to predict, cause and effect. You hype people up this much. I said they're going to shoot up Jewish centers and start bombing them. And I would imagine you're about to see a lot more of this. So this is a big problem. Because if Netanyahu hits Iran, Iran says they're going to hit them with tens of thousands of ballistic missiles. And as soon as they do that, Israel's going to nuke the living hell out of Iran. And then, ladies and gentlemen, there's a very good chance India and Pakistan will start nuking each other. China will come into it. And then that's the end of the world. And it figures, Benjamin Netanyahu wants Armageddon. He's a demon possessed. I mean, obviously. And I guess that'd make him feel powerful to kill everybody on the planet. So, and for all the psychotics that just say, from the mountains of the sea, push Israel into the ocean, we need peace like Trump's pushing. Israel's not going anywhere. Okay?
Here's just a quick reminder, guys, of our sponsor, Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com has all the hottest new styles, all the most incredible boutique fashion designers available to you. And of course, we're all American, and we're all about making America great again at Wendy'sLimited.com, guys. Wendy'sLimited.com. Of course, like we were going to say earlier, the nation of Israel was set up by nefarious figures who were obviously connected with the city of London, who were obviously individuals like Jesuits and Knights of Malta in the background, who are obviously very dedicated to what happens with this city of Jerusalem and the nation of Israel and the surrounding land. And they're interested in making sure there's an agitation and a constant dialectic conflict going on there between the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews. The Jewish people who have been brought back to their land, many of them who believe prophetically through the prophecies regarding Zion that they should be brought back to their land and that they will be brought back home in Aliyah to their land. And this was a fulfillment of prophecy. And you can believe that or not believe that. The people in the land can believe that or not believe that, but they're in the land. And these things have happened. It doesn't matter if the Rothschilds were behind it. It really doesn't make any difference. And the fact that we're going to have an info war, and we're not going to talk about the Albert Pike letters at all, and what it really means, that they're obviously planning on having this explosive worldwide international conflict in a religious sense between Judeo-Christian West and the communist, Islamic-driven, CIA, terrorist-created insanity that's really being exploited across a whole constellation of nations in the Middle East who were really created by the city of London, right? After World War One, they carved up the Ottoman Empire and they created, Libya, Saudi Arabia, and Iran and Iraq. And so the usefulness of now these created territories, including Israel, is going to be in the back and forth dialectical violence that can be used in order to make sure that land is totally sterilized of all heretics and all Muslims and all Jews and all, yes, leftists, all homosexuals, right? The idea is for the Pope of Rome to control that land. And that's why I'm so amazed that the info war goes on and no one talks about this, because the Pope of Rome has desired to control Jerusalem since the beginning of the papacy, at the very development of the papacy to the precipice of power as a sovereign under law and a principality and a kingdom. And all the way throughout its history, even the Templar Knights were named after the Temple of Solomon, which is in Jerusalem. They might as well be called the Jerusalem Knights. And so now you guys don't want to talk about the Jerusalem Knights or the Hospitaller Jerusalem Knights or anything to do with the Pope's constant, everlasting, permanent conviction that he would possess and own the Holy Land. And he doesn't want any heretical Jews or heretical Muslims or heretical Protestants over there to see where Jesus bled on the sidewalk, right? They don't want any of those people around there. It's going to be the center point of their new kingdom. And if you read the Bible and you even believe it, like these guys, I hear Alex Jones talking all the time about how he believes in Jesus and the Bible. How about Revelation, Alex? Well, let's do your info war. Let's go and discuss Revelation, because in Revelation it's very clear the Antichrist is going to go down to Jerusalem, which is in Israel, in case you guys were not aware of that. And there's going to be a temple there, and the Antichrist is going to stand in the temple and call himself God. And this isn't something that happened in the past under some kind of Persian dynasty. There's no other fulfillment of this prophecy. If you read it carefully, it's something that is going to come at a time when there'll be a new temple built in Jerusalem. And you know who is really dedicated to a new temple being built in Jerusalem? InfoWars, the Templars. So in any case, the purpose of this is to just point out where we're missing and lacking critical information, because without the knowledge, God said, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, for lack of information. So if this is a struggle over information, and you're taking away information from me that I need, I could be destroyed without it, then you're really effing around with my destiny, aren't you? You're really screwing with my life if you're going to filter the information and curate the data so that I can only have part of the story. So that's what we're here. We're here to unscrew the record, guys. We're here to get to the bottom of the line, right? That's what this is about. We have to get down to the bottom of the whole thing, and get to a place of just total clarity. And that's really what this is, the most difficult thing. And it's the most difficult thing for the extreme left and the extreme right, which are really, just like we discussed in our previous discussion, extremes meet. And so you have this heightened extremism and this dialectical warfare, and it all on both sides, on both extremes, on the extreme left and extreme right, you just have raw, insane, unconscious, unbridled Jew hate. It doesn't have to have a reason. It doesn't have to be rational. It doesn't have to be sane or cogent or have any meaning. It just has to be violent, unthinking, unflinching, unswerving murder and bloodshed against people who they perceive are Zionists. So this anti-Zionist movement is going to be a big deal. We're moving towards this battle of Armageddon. The battle of Armageddon doesn't just happen in Jerusalem. It's a worldwide battle. It's a total battle. It's a third world war. It's a dialectic clash bringing about total war. And no one in any society, the way this is being carefully arranged, scientifically, psychologically, the highest acumen of academic precision, these individuals are going to dissolve and destroy the construct of nation states if it's the last thing they do. I mean, that's what they're dedicated to do. And so you'll see this 42 months of biblically predicted, prophetically prescribed decimation of the world as the augmentation, the aggrandizement of the papal power comes to absolute world dictatorship. That's what people. That's why I'm wondering when somebody's going to put their finger on it. And you're trying not to offend people. You're always trying not to pick on people because of their religious choices. And a lot of times you're in a family religion. Like your family is dictating your religion. You're married into it all around you, and you can't really think outside that box. And so it's more of like a psychosocial mode of tribalism than it is religion, right? I mean, in my mind, religion is a free choice. It's made by people who are of age, who have thought it out, who have weighed the consequences, who know what the outcomes and the pros and cons, right? It has to be a personal, conscious decision. And just because your parents made you do it all your life doesn't mean that's what you are. At some point, you have to come of age and consciously choose that thing. If you're of age, you should choose for yourself what is right, and don't let other people choose that for you, or your family, or anyone else. You have to be polite to people, but you ultimately have to live with your own fateful decision, and your family and other people are not going to be able to intervene in the final outcome of your destiny based on your life choices and the choices you make as a person, right?
Let's say you do Easter dinner and it's late in the evening and so forth. I'm just telling you, you're not going to want to miss these programs. They have an investigative researcher of extremist groups there by the name of Ryan Morrow. He will be on the program on Sunday. We have a huge program Saturday, a huge program Sunday. And let me just give you a little bit of taste of this, because he'll delve into it much more deeply, but a little taste. They have put out two fairly recent reports. The one I'm looking at is Marching Towards Violence, the Domestic Anti-Israel Movement. Now, stick with me. This was put out in October 2024. But listen to this. This is what's important. A study of the online rhetoric from major, quote-unquote, pro-Palestinian groups and activists in the United States before and after the Hamas attack on October 7, 2023 on Israel concludes, ready? The activist protests have morphed into an anti-American, anti-police movement. An anti-American, anti-police movement with sharply radicalized rhetoric that advocates terrorism and sedition in the United States. I've been warning about this. You've got this fusion of the Marxists and the Islamists. And they're talking about overthrowing the West. They're talking about overthrowing the United States. Because like some of these podcasters and influencers who don't know their ass from a hole in the ground, they go on about American empire. But so do the Islamists and so do the Marxists. And so you have even this bigger umbrella of some people on the so-called right and some people on the Marxist Islamist left who talk the same way and in some ways believe the same thing. An analysis of thousands of social media posts by 496 of the most active so-called pro-Palestinian groups and activists, many of them connected to so-called charities and nonprofits, found a 3,000% surge in calls for violence. They're talking about violence in America against Americans. And 186% increase in the use of anti-American and anti-police keywords and phrases since the Hamas-led terrorist attacks on October 7, 2023. And I said we're going to get into this much more deeply with the man who researched this, Ryan Morrow of the Capital Research Center. He's their investigative researcher of extremist groups. The study identified 150 pro-Palestinian groups behind the nationwide protests and warned of increasing militancy, particularly targeting law enforcement and perceived Zionist targets, Jews. The term pro-Palestine or pro-Palestinian is put inside quotation marks in their report because that is how the groups in question define themselves. We do not concede that such extremist groups are generally pursuing an agenda that would benefit innocent Palestinians. The broadening of the pro-Palestinian movement's agenda to include siding with Western adversaries in conflicts around the world and advocating for defunding the police indicates the movement has become a permanent presence in the United States. See, I think part of this 2020 rioting that took place also involves these people. It will not fade when issues surrounding Israelis and Palestinians lose prominence. I've tried to explain this over and over again. Mark, why do you keep talking about Israel? Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. These are the same forces in the United States that want to destroy us. 9/11 had nothing to do with Israel. Instead, it will attempt to preserve and expand its infrastructure by exploiting popular causes and inserting anti-Americanism, hatred of Israel, anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism, and anti-police bigotry into those causes' narratives. And this is who some of these so-called influencers and podcasters, among others, stand with when they're telling us to stand down. Don't confront this. It's free speech. Don't confront this. What are you, a warmonger? The drums of war? Therefore, the observed radicalization will likely continue into the indefinite future and incite violence, hatred, bigotry, and criminality into other contentious causes. This is why Donald Trump really is so better than people whispering in his ear, than people trying to influence him into their positions, because Donald Trump knows what's going on. He senses it instinctively and intellectually. He sees it. Shockingly, many of the groups and individuals who use the keywords denoting calls for violence or hatred of America or the police are officially charities, meaning they're 501c3 tax-exempt charities, or projects of charities, or they enjoy the benefits of official status as student groups on colleges that are either private charities or government institutions. And this is why what Donald Trump is doing with Harvard and Columbia and the rest is so important. It has nothing at all to do with free speech. Morons who don't understand what free speech is seem to have the loudest voices. Now, among their findings, and remember, we're going to pursue this much more comprehensively on Sunday. During the 15 months following the Hamas-led terrorist attacks on October 7th, the pro-Palestinian movement, and he quotes that throughout, their movement's use of hateful anti-American and anti-police keywords and phrases rose by 186% in comparison to the 15-month prior to the preceding the attacks. These so-called pro-Palestinian movements' hateful anti-American and anti-police posts following October 7th had over 23 million views on Twitter and TikTok and 4.2 million engagements in the form of comments, likes, and shares on those platforms. Hateful anti-American and anti-police posts endorsing violence skyrocketed 3,000% during the months after the attacks on the Jews. The pro-Palestinian movement's quote-unquote anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli tropes largely depict Israel as an appendage of a villainized United States. In other words, hatred of Israel is commonly rooted in anti-Americanism, anti-Westernism, and anti-capitalism, which I've been explaining over and over and over again. And I read to you from Zuhdi Jasser's book the other evening. This is the ideology. A mainstream belief of so-called pro-Palestinian movement is that the United States shares Israel's illegitimacy because it is a settler colonial state with no right to exist. And so it's a disgrace when a billionaire from Silicon Valley, a former Democrat who supports Trump, pushes out a video calling the United States an empire. And all these other freaks, frauds, and phonies who do the same damn thing. The movement's groups and activists frequently state that just as Israel should be destroyed and replaced by Palestine, the United States and its, quote, colonial borders, unquote, should be abolished and replaced by Turtle Island, a mythical land that some Native American traditions claim once encompassed North and Central America. Folks, if you've read American Marxism, you know all about this.
And we have to talk about, answer Mark Levin. I mean, it's true, Mark, that I do love my nation, I love my Constitution, but we're in to use your words, Mark, we're in a post-constitutional America. A post-constitutional America. So this idea that somehow if I call out my nation and I call out my country and I say, hey, you know, this nation is no longer being run by constitutional ideals or a framework of legality that is anywhere even closely resembling the original framework, the original structure of American governance, then you know, I might be forgiven, because this is looking more like an empire all the time, run by one dictatorial commander in chief or another. And so the emergency war powers situation not being addressed, not being discussed. I mean, you have people on in the absolute fringe, individuals who are totally censored, who are totally castigated as flat earthers, or as radicals, or as, conspiracy theorists, or whatever gets it done, racists, like whatever gets the people to the popular herd, the lemmings, right? They're all watching each other react. That's what society is, not constantly. They're all watching each other react to see if they're reacting the right way too. So that's something we don't do on this show, right, guys? On this podcast, we don't observe each other's reactions in order to decide what we're going to do, right? We're going to go ahead and just make our choice, and we're going to have to follow our instincts and follow our gut. That's why it was difficult during the COVID-19, the PSYOP, the psychological operations in order to induce people to take it, and then later they're like, no one told you to take it, and everyone, like, all these people died, right? It was the PSYOP was so intense that if you had to really struggle with your own, like, choices, like your own decision-making process. Like, people I know are doing this, people who I rely on, my bosses, like companies, like the world, like everyone is seeming to tell me that I'm wrong, and you have to maintain your own clarity of thought. So those kind of experiences are going to, like, get you all on your own. You're not even trying to share your thought process or share your private mode of deliberation with anyone else, right? It gets really serious, because you don't want are you an anti-masker or an anti-vaxxer or like whatever? Like, it becomes like a process of breaking down the civil society into madness. And so that's why it's so scary, because you can't rely on other people to make the right choice. Everyone's telling you to go different directions. It's like pulling up and asking for directions in Memphis. Is it left or right? And, like, you have 42 people tell you different things, and, like, it becomes very confusing. It's like you cannot rely on anyone else in this life, and you have to have a strong sense of value and existential veracity. So you're looking for a sense of total destiny in the fact that you're finding yourself in this existence, or you're one of those individuals who just thinks that you're the same as a plankton or a worm or an amoeba. You have no evolutionary value, and that there's too many people and we should just kill them all off, right? Like you're just part of the Bill Gates mass psychological conditioning programs, right? They're just there to make you hate yourself. I'm really a germ, right? We're just all viruses. We should just kill all life, right? That's what you have these people, the anti-lifers now, right? It's not enough to kill humans off. You'd have to, like, extinguish all life. So it's just inert crystal matter and minerals and blazing starlight. That's all there is. There's no life. So for people to even sit around and think of this shit, it means that they haven't struggled in a long time. Right? They haven't had to go down to the well and, like, get a bucket of water and bring it up to the hut. Right? They haven't had any kind of difficulty in life. Once they sit around masturbatorily in these universities, the banality of all life and white supremacy, right? That's what they do all day. They got their purple hair. Like, the people in the third world countries, they can't afford purple dye for their hair, you fucking worm. Come on, you're pathetic. If you want to enact all of your own philosophies, just put the revolver to your head, and by all means, do us all a favor, right? Enact your total belief and your total conviction. Don't go shoot some Jewish couple in the back. Apparently the Jewish man was a messianic Jew. I mean, he was a Christian Jew who believed that Yeshua was the Messiah. He was about to propose to his woman. His family just told the media that he was about to propose to his darling, and that she was surely going to say yes, and they were going to be married very, very soon. These people are, like, walking with the Lord right now. So in many ways they lucked out. But the horrors of it, the horrors that is revealed in the betrayal and the anti-human, the inhuman vermin, right? They show themselves. Like, we get to see that these people, you can't trust these people to have a future. You got to put that man in a concrete box in a cage for the rest of his life. Same thing with the boy that stabbed the other. He ran to his car and got a knife. What's he doing with a knife in his car? What kind of, like, weak little, like, saggy little coward is it that's got to run to the car for the knife? What a weak little boy who couldn't just take a beating, right? It's not in the rap song to take a beating, right? The CIA rap music, you got to go to the car and get the knife. That's what they tell him. So he just did what he was told, right? That's right. This is another exciting word from our awesome sponsor, Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com is the hottest new styles and designer labels in the fashion industry. You got to go check out Wendy'sLimited.com. And of course, Wendy's Boutique Limited is not sucked into all the venal brainwash of the leftist political culture out there. We know what a woman is, and we're here to serve women. We're not here to be deceived by all the fake-looking dudes out there, but dressed like women. No offense. And we are here to remind you that Wendy'sLimited.com is a leader in online boutique couture trends with Wendy's Limited catalog selection, awesome designer apparel, and fine jewelry. You got to check out Wendy'sLimited.com. And our sponsor has been very generous to us and keeps us going here. Please come and check out the online obsession, Wendy'sLimited.com, Wendy'sLimited.com.
The whole AI entity, the demon from beyond. And I want to go into the history of how this has been used in pop culture to prepare us for the acceptance of this entity. Like you, I don't think that all forms of AI are necessarily bad or evil, but I do think that if you look at the people who formulated this system, as we're going to talk about today, and the way that pop culture has formulated this, it's intended to get us to submit to and interject ourselves into this matrix system. They want an AI running everything. In fact, back in 1966, when Dr. Carol Quigley wrote Tragedy and Hope, there was a famous chapter in the middle where he says that the future technocratic society would be run by giant AI supercomputers. That chapter is overlooked because people always focus on the other section where he talks about the bankers and the banking elite and them arranging World War I and World War II for the purpose of a global technocratic government. But it's not just that policy paper ethos that gives us this ideology and the mouthpieces of the elite. It's also pop culture, which in many cases was working in a symbiotic relationship with those in power, with those from this eugenics-based establishment who wanted to create this world, this future technate, as some call it, that would ultimately be anti-human. And people have to understand that Alex is completely right when he talks about the end of and the removal of all carbon-based life forms and the replacing of it with a silicon-based life form of some kind. If you remember many years ago, of course, Alex made Endgame, and one of the key texts in that Endgame was the books that were written by Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil wrote The Age of Spiritual Machines. He wrote The Age of Singularity, or The Coming Singularity. And these books were really important for telling us where the establishment, the real technocratic deep state, wanted to go. It's not technology that's the problem. It's the programmers and the plans and their ideology that's the problem. But before we get to that, I want to talk about 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you remember back when Clark was writing his famous trilogy, he wrote 2001, 2010, and then 3001. And it's all about transhumanism. It's about post-human existence and reality and man's apotheosis through technology. In 2001, if you remember Kubrick in this famous, probably one of the most famous movies, if not the most famous movie of all time, I read it as a kind of an alchemical allegory. I don't think it's about all the same things that other conspiracy people think necessarily, but I do think there's a message, there's a story going on there that if we look at Arthur C. Clarke and what he was talking about, we get an insight into this idea of the possibility of man's apotheosis that is becoming his own God through technology. In 2001, you remember the monolith shows up, and that monolith is intended to be a future AI. It's kind of like us in the future, or the future deity that is ultimately some kind of supercomputer, kind of stepping back and giving us indicators and signposts as to human evolution into the future and how we could basically become gods on our own. Part of the reason that Arthur C. Clarke had this idea was that he was in the circles of a lot of esotericists and occultists. He was hanging out with Aleister Crowley, the most famous Satanist of the last century. And Clarke was interested in putting that ideology into his science fiction. In fact, most science fiction, you could argue, not all of it. I mean, I think C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy is a unique exception, which is an explicitly Christian sci-fi story, with Volume 3 being about the aliens identified specifically as demons. And if you remember, in the third of the Space Trilogy, C.S. Lewis put the Christian spirituality and ethos into that text by making the demons want to depopulate all humanity. So C.S. Lewis is really one of the best science fiction writers, even though everybody thinks about Narnia, they think about fantasy. But in the Space Trilogy, it's actually the demons that want to cloak themselves as aliens and then convince human beings to depopulate themselves. Now, if we go back to 2001, when the monolith shows up, which is this sort of Luciferian cube or a kind of a screen, so to speak. In fact, in the original screenplay, Arthur C. Clarke had the intention of it being a kind of a computer screen, and the computer screen would have little readouts, and it would be, I don't know, playing Oregon Trail or something for the monkeys, and this would then spawn the next phase or stage of evolution. As the movie progresses, as you know, Bowman, who is the astronaut several thousand years into the future, is ejected out of this sort of phallic spaceship into exploring the cosmos at another level, right? So they find another monolith that's transmitting a signal, which is what Alex was talking about, the signal that's been transmitted by this entity. And you see these sort of diamond figures there, these platonic solids that eventually direct Bowman to exiting this dimension, this spatial reality. And I put in my book, in this chapter that I did in my first book, you can see here, there's a cube, and this cube includes all of the possible directions that you can go in this dimension. You can go up, down, left, right, back, forward, etc., right? There's only 6 ways you can go in this dimension. And the whole point of 2001: A Space Odyssey, for those that don't recall, is that Bowman is eventually the first person to achieve apotheosis through exiting this reality. So there's a Darwinian survival of the fittest sort of exchange between him and Hal. They have this battle. Bowman ends up victorious in the battle, so we think, at least in the first one. And what's not included in the film is what Clarke had in the original story, which is that Starchild, which is the rebirthed entity that Bowman becomes when he exits the Matrix. Believe it or not, it is actually a Matrix. The whole point of that sort of sequence where he's exiting through the portal, through the Stargate, is that Bowman is achieving apotheosis through leaving the limitations of dimensional time and space. So he's transcending the limitations of time and space, the third and fourth dimension. He's going out of the matrix. You see, it looks like a kind of a computer code. It looks like a bunch of colors. And there were even platonic solids, those sort of diamonds that were there. That's, I think, intended to tell us that we are stuck in a dimension that technology, this is the story of 2001, that technology will help us to transcend. And so Bowman sees himself and his own death there towards the end in that Victorian room. And then he becomes a new being reborn as Starchild. And what's not in the movie that's in the original Arthur C. Clarke story was that Starchild decided that this Earth was a giant failure. It was a giant mess. And so there's a bunch of nukes around Earth that nuke Earth, and Starchild starts over as the god of a new universe. That's the storyline, at least in the movie version of 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, a lot of people overlooked 2010 because it wasn't as famous of a presentation. But if you want to understand this Luciferian ethos, this Promethean ethos of posthumanism or transhumanism from film, 2001 actually goes even further, and it goes back in time, and it tells us at the end of the Cold War how the Cold War would give rise to the technocracy. And it's actually a synthesis third way film where you have the joining of the Soviet scientists together with the American scientists. And once they get over their petty squabbles and their nationalism and all that, and they accept an international technocratic Star Trek Federation style attitude, then we're able to overcome the limitations and achieve the next level of apotheosis. So it's supposed to be 10 years after 2001 in the story version, in the books. And at the end of that film, Bowman, or Howman, who's now become merged as this new sort of divine transcendent entity, speaks through these monoliths, and you get all of these monoliths. So that now there's like thousands of monoliths, and they can kind of sort of change their size and their dimensions because they're outside of this spatial dimension. So they're kind of like angelic beings or deities or gods or something like this. And the purpose of that story is to tell us that we were actually seated here as kind of Luciferian beings by this alien AI that now wants us to go forth and conquer the universe. Now, I don't think that it's wrong for humans to explore the known universe and all that to the best of our capabilities. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that technology is going to make us gods, though. So I think we're always going to be human. And I don't think that AI can ever come alive or become conscious. Depends on how you define consciousness. And so if you think humans are made in the image of God, then they have a special quality, a soul, that a computer could never have. A computer is always just going to be code. But in 2010, there's a specific statement at the end that really it sort of identifies human beings as the children of the sun, or the children of the light bringer, who are tasked with going forth and exploring the known universe, which I think is explicitly Clarke's version of a kind of Luciferian Promethean deity. In these same elite circles around the same time that Crowley and Clarke and people were hanging out together, you had Aldous Huxley and H.G. Wells hanging out in the same types of circles, and they wrote very similar treatises about how this is what was really going on. You find Isaac Asimov writing books, the Foundation series, with very similar stories about AI kind of being a future quasi-deity. So there's something, I think, that these people are telling us through the pop fiction and through their nonfiction writings about how they view humanity as essentially monkeys or apes, and that they need to be gotten rid of. And that's that depopulation narrative that almost entirely runs through every one of the technocratic elite, except for perhaps Elon Musk. He seems to be pro-human. He seems to be pro-life. He doesn't seem to have the same attitude. Whatever criticisms people have, at least when it comes to this issue, he doesn't seem to be for depopulation. Why would we not have as many human beings as possible to, go forth and to conquer? In Genesis, you have the dominion mandate, and I don't think there's anything that necessarily means that it has to stop at Earth. If humans want to explore, I think they're free to do so. They can go and do whatever they would like to do because God gave us that power, that free will, that potentiality that we need to actualize.
So we here returning back to proceed apace, and I hope you will do whatever is in your power there to support us over here in our mission our mission to take podcasting to the next level and to make this really, and ultimately to piece together this informational debriefing and really this is just to highlight my own curiosities and interests and the things that I think that are not being kind of focused on enough as the focal point of what we really need to be talking about. And of course, this is a small podcast, but the people who are listening to this podcast, let's be sincere. I mean, the people that are listening to this podcast are going to be the only people out there who have ever read history or have any interest in the more obscured and veiled aspects of history, which are doomed to be constantly suppressed or revised out of the historical paradigm or the political conjecture, and ultimately these various forms. You can see that the mindset of the academic groupthink becomes so intense. Everything is this white supremacy. So now we can think about everything in terms of how we're going to get this deliberate international Marxian conflict and crisis creation underway. And so this has to be a globalist race war agenda, which is going to find a way to highlight and focus within the media with intense scrutiny on all these various matters and putting it all under a lens of racialism, so that the media, mockingbird, intelligence community, media tech algorithm of control will prevail on incensing the masses and inciting people who are obviously the lowest experience and life experience and educational quota, to the extent that they're the most easily rabble-roused, the most easily incited with the invective and the rhetoric. And Yasmin Crockett over there out of Texas, right, just amping up the race war. That's what it's all about. Bigotry and this kind of reversal of racial antagonism, so that white people can be the new N-words, and they can be of course this is all about equity. So we got to have a little payback here, and the people of European descent can suffer under racial inequality in this country a little bit because it's due them. That's their thinking. That's their kind of like socialist algebra that they balance their mass. If you look at the Georgetown University website, it's all about a hyper-focused study of racial inequities to the point where it's just a constant weeping, crybaby, alienation and disaffectation. And so we can see it clearly coming into view here that the great agitation that is going to consume these nations here and the prep work of having all these mass migration all over the world, the human osmotic flows, the pressure of these people groups trampling the way across nations, right, to get into Switzerland or to get into Germany or get into Europe, the Netherlands. And there you can see them committing rape and you can see them committing Marxist revolution in the name of Palestine. And you can see that they're all situated to become the hordes of invaders and mass criminal deviants, that the waves of horrifying and grotesque, really subhumans that are there just to dissolve and wreck their lives, destroying the civilization that they were not capable of achieving on their own, right? So they're ultimately there to demand that London and the UK become a place where Jews are verboten, so Jew-free, right? They want a Jew-free nation because of the demands of all these Muslims. And they're demanding that individuals in the UK government sever all ties with the Israeli government over the Palestinian issue. And of course, this would make London and the UK exactly like the places where they left, like Bangladesh or like Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? These are the nations where all these poor souls, bereft of any hope in the world, have come to the great and wonderful benevolence of the UK to become great subjects of the crown, right? No, they're not there to become subjects of the crown, or not there to participate in civilization, or to become Englishmen in any context or in any sense of the word, but they're there to ultimately overthrow and destroy what's left of the vestiges of Protestant Western civilization. And of course, to push that, destroy that completely out of the land. And of course, once Islam is done raising its bloody sword to destroy the enemies of Jesuitism and the rise of the new Holy Roman Empire, which of course is a point that we were trying to make it clear to people who are fighting in the informational war. You may want to be aware that they're trying to bring about the rise of the new Holy Roman Emperor, right? And that's coming about, and you can see that coming into view is the soon to be the presidency of Italy and of the Vatican and of the Holy See will become predominant in the European Union. And you can see that it's just so obvious and predictable. It's just, you can see it coming, as you know, that the night follows the day, right? So that's where we're at. We're here just to kind of bring some clarity. I hear a lot, people discussing how Hitler was really just trying to bring about a new European Union Council. And of course, this European Union Council was realized ultimately in the imperial construction of the European Union. But of course, that is to bring about the Holy Roman Empire once more, as is predicted in the book of Revelation and the prophetic and Zionist prophecies, right? We're Christian Zionists over here because we're looking at the prophecies and we're seeing how they lay out. We're understanding them in their own context. We're not turning everything into a rapture scenario, right? An easy way out with a Nicolaus Carpathian world leader, right? We understand perfectly that the system of the Antichrist is the same system that Jesus Christ stood against personally when he went against the governor of Rome and in Jerusalem, right? He stood against ultimately Pontius Pilate, not violently, but ideologically, and in his principles, he stood against the powers of Rome and the power structure there in Israel, who had sent forth their new Pontifex Maximus, Caesar, right? Tiberius Caesar being on the throne at the time. And it was that Pontifex Maximus imperial power of the Caesar that Christ stood against. And of course, it never went anywhere. It never disappeared. It was a continuous chain of succession of popes down through history, which allowed the Pontifex Maximus titles to go from the imperial Caesars to ultimately land in the combination of the power structure, geopolitical power structure that you see now in the Vatican today. It's very serious. These are very hardcore militants, ancient orders of knighthood, chivalry going back 500-600 years, right? And they're there to maintain the bastion of their ideal of Christendom and to fight the Saracens and the Muslims, right? And of course, that's the constant power dialectic we see continuously between Rome and Islam, right? And of course, you know that the leaders of the highest level are all kissing each other's books and slobbering over each other's hands and, giggling together and taking pictures in the Vatican, right? But out there in the streets, the Palestinians and the Jews and, they were planning a terror attack, of course. I think it was at Harvard campus. I have to go look it up. I have to go check I have this report that they arrested a few guys and they were going to do a mass terror event, right? So whoever is spinning that up in the background really has their finger on the pulse of these Islamic radicalization process and the thinking there. And we know who could be behind that, And it's the same individuals who are trying to start up this race war, right? The same individuals who are dead set. Like, can you imagine the entire prestige of your campus and the entire imprimatur as a collegiate academic powerhouse, right? And in the background, you're in your history, you supported the Nazis and Hitler because you're Harvard. And now, or you're Georgetown University in this case, and now you have to focus on all the classes, all the highlights on your website about focusing on racial inequities, right? We got to focus on racial inequities, guys. That's what the most important thing in the world is when you're at the highest level of the academic world, right? Because they're trying to bring about a mass conflagration and a mass movement of violence to instantiate the kind of crisis that they really need to see in order to maintain the power structure as it is, in order to maintain the need for emergency war powers, etc. And I do like what Trump is doing. People have a lot of questions. There's questions about what's going on with the Epstein stuff, obviously. We have to see it to believe it, right? We're not just going to take people's word for it anymore. And this is a long game, so we don't know really where people's real loyalties are at. In the end, we don't know. This is for all the marbles, guys. And you can see these people play hardball to the highest level. And all of us here in America are on the line because we are the ruling sovereignty in this country, right? The people who can vote. That's why they're trying to always dissolve our sovereignty with just illegal immigrants everywhere voting in all these elections. And so it's a constant attack against the American people, right? With fentanyl, drug poisonings, right, etc. You can go in the store and buy a box of Wheaties and it's just full of toxins that are trying to kill you. Right? So it's a process of destroying the American people because they represent the power in the structure in this system of democratic representative government. And they all ultimately are the target, right? Just how you would, back in the past, they would go and try to assassinate the Emperor Ferdinand, right, in order to collapse the government or overturn the world. But now the power in this country is so diffuse that you have to use policies of medical murder in the hospital, right? Use mass eugenics or mass euthanasia programs where they're trying to depopulate. Like, those are the kind of ways you can target a populace for destruction. And that's what they're doing all the time. That's what these Bill Gates individuals are dedicated all the time with their mosquito, trying to find a way to put vaccines in the cows or in the livestock, or just they're constantly trying to find a way that, with their twisted last putrid years of life that they have left before they try to upload themselves into the AI or whatever they're going to do, they're going to try to just ruin the rest of our lives, right? Because they're in a state of damnation, and their state of damnation was projected onto them from their parents, who are abominations and reprobates, right? And so they ultimately set them up for the destruction that they're going headlong towards, right? So these individuals are going towards destruction, and they're trying to bring us all with them. It's pretty simple, right? They can't change their own fate. They can't kill God. They can't destroy everybody in the world with the vaccine. And like, what would be the purpose anyway? It's just at this rate, it's just Malthusian insanity, right? Just lashing out and like smirking with the ugly little butthole pin that they have, right? Their weird their flaky, colorful New World Order pin that they got. And all they do all the time is try to find a way to murder us, right? And to keep us stupid, to lower our IQs, to dumb us down in classrooms with frivolous pseudo-knowledge and pseudoscience that just is ultimately harmful, right? So you can't trust the medical establishment. You can't trust the American Psychological Association. You can't trust any of these supposed medical organizations who are set up by Skull and Bonesmen out of Yale, right? And another thing that Alex Jones doesn't like to talk about, he tries to make them something other than what they are, which is just a very pragmatic and black and white, flat line, one-dimensional platform directly into the Knights of Malta. So I don't know why. I mean, these guys are like they're like the final year graduates of Yale, and they get them in there, and they don't need to be in a fraternity. They're graduating that year, right? You get in a fraternity at the beginning, and you spend your formative college years in a fraternity with your frat brothers. You don't do that at the very end, right? This is just them picking who is going to be the elite leaders of the next level, and they're going to become papal knights. That's why in their initiation in the tomb in Skull and Bones, they get down and they kiss the slippered foot of a guy dressed up like the Pope, right? So that's why Alex Jones is just like his information is interesting, and he covers a lot of stuff, but he won't get into the actual direct realities. Like he'll talk about Muslims, he'll talk about anybody, but he won't really pinpoint and take us home to Rome, right? He won't do it, and he's kind of forced to ultimately because of the realities of dealing with the papacy and dealing with the truth of the actual existence of this formidable and tyrannical, and one historian described them as a diabolical control structure out of the Vatican. And everyone knows who controls the Vatican, right? Everyone knows, right? We don't even have to use the word. We know who the controlling power elite was situated there. So ultimately, everyone all the princes of the world, Queen Beatrix, Queen Elizabeth, it doesn't matter. If you're at the top of the power structure, you understand. You get over there, just like the Skull and Bones boys, and you get like the Knights of Malta. You get on your knees and you kiss the slipper of the granddaddy. That's what you do.